Welcome, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Heather. This is Donnie. We have our special guest, Isabella Price. She's a scholar, professor, and she's written numerous books. And today she's here to talk about her book, which is, the name has been changed actually.
Yes.
So I'm with her, so it's going to come out as a new cover.
Right.
But this is the exact same book that's on the table over there. The Sacred Love, Manifestations of the Goddess. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. She is quite the scholar. She's done a lot of research, and her book just reads about the goddess throughout the times from all different backgrounds. So we're in for quite a treat tonight. She's going to offer also a meditation and an invocation. And then, so we're going to be doing that for about the first hour. And then the second hour, Donnie and I will lead us in a little full moon ritual. It's the full moon tonight, waxing basically, because it comes in exactly about 7:30 in the morning, tomorrow morning. And there's a partial lunar eclipse, just like a quarter lunar eclipse. And we'll talk about that a little more, but it just seems like the timing is perfect here for Isabella to share about the dark goddess. So without further ado,
Thank you so much for your lovely introduction, Heather. I hope I'll be able to live up to it. And thank you so much for hosting me tonight. And it's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here with all of you. And I want to thank you to come. I'm not sure if I can say to carve out time of your busy schedules, because we're not in the Bay Area right now, which is really good for you. In the Bay Area, you almost have to really thank people to carve out time of their busy schedules, because it's the pace there is so hectic these days, as some of you, I'm sure, who've lived there or go there on occasions know. So my husband Rod was sitting there, and we live in the Bay Area, so we're just here visiting this enchanting, sacred land, and we've been here for a whole week already. And it's so rejuvenating, it keeps us going for another year. But it's hard to think that in 2 days we have to take that airplane and fly back. And it's just like the energy fields are so intense in the Bay Area these days with all the changes going on. And it's just, you come here and it's like, I can breathe, it's like a homecoming. Every time we land, we get out of the airport, we just feel the sacredness, it just embraces you, and it's really the mother. For me, this is the sacred land, this is the mother embodied here, and we can just feel it, and so again, thank you so much for coming, and I'm really looking forward to share something. I'm very passionate about it, and I've done some research, but it's also, for me, it has to go beyond the research. It has to go deeper. It's really also living it and tuning into her energy and allowing her to guide me. And sometimes it's not easy. It's challenging, but just opening up and surrendering and deepening and surrendering and really being able to tune into her guidance and open myself up. So I would like to start tonight with an invocation of the Mother. So if you would perhaps just take a few deep breaths to just really arrive fully. Some of you may have had to, drive for a distance to be here tonight. So just take a few very deep mindful breaths and close your eyes, if you will. And I'm just going to read this invocation, drawing her energies into this beautiful circle that we all co-create tonight. This beautiful full moon circle. So I'm going to invoke the Great Mother now. This is a poem I wrote recently that just came to me. You are the beauty and majesty of the earth, the tree, leaf, plant, river, lake, fur, claw, fang, blood, and tears. You are the cosmic womb, birthing solar flares, swirling planets, stardust, atoms, photons, and cells. You are the ever-unfolding creative life force and the ecstatic dancer on the cremation grounds. You are the honored and the scorned, the whore and the holy, the wife and the virgin, the mother and the daughter. You are the first and the last. From you all things emerge, and to you they must return. So I invite you to slowly open your eyes and come back into our circle. And tonight I'm going to talk about the dark-skinned mothers across cultures. And of course the term dark mother evokes sometimes all sorts of interesting associations. I remember giving a talk on this particular subject in one of the Unity churches a couple of years ago in the Bay Area. And I remember before the event, a gentleman approached me, and I could see he had a very serious concern in his faces. And I somehow had that premonition, he may not be quite comfortable with the title. Well, let's see where it's going. And then sure enough, he comes and he looks at me and he says, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Yes, please, feel free, anything." He says, "Are you into black magic? That kind of talk about the Dark Mother." It's kind of, and I completely, understood where he was coming from, but I assured him, no, I'm not into black magic, this is a safe place. So, interesting is, when we hear the word dark in our culture, especially here in the United States, sometimes this very dualistic perception that there is the light and everything that's affiliated with the light, it's the good thing, and then there's the dark, and everything that's affiliated with the dark is kind of not good, it's evil. It's kind of a stereotype that's deeply entrenched in our collective consciousness. I mean, Hollywood perpetuates this type of stereotypes. The good guys are always the light-skinned guys, and the not-so-good guys, sometimes the dark-skinned guys. And then when we look at Orthodox Christianity, organized Christianity, well, Christmas, it's a celebration usually of the light. It's around the time of the solstice. It was, the day where the ancient Romans would celebrate the sun, the great sun. So this is the time when Jesus Christ is born. So when the light becomes stronger. So it's we very much have these polarities of light and dark. It's either or, rather than seeing both of them as complementing each other. And when you look at the Chinese symbol of the yin and yang, the yin usually represents the dark and the yang the light, and there's this curve, this fluid curve between the two, and each one contains a dot of the essence of the other within itself. So light and dark in Taoism in China are not viewed as two incompatible polarities or duality, but they're rather viewed as complementing each other. It's like the two sides of the coin, and together they form the harmonious universe. And so when we go back into the pre-Christian time, like these ancient goddesses that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, like Isis in Egypt or Inanna Ishtar in Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, or, for example, Demeter, the great grain mother in ancient Greece, they all had dark-skinned manifestations. And so they all actually originate from the African goddesses, the African mothers. And, even the Black Madonnas in Europe, and I'm going to talk a bit more about Black Madonnas, and of course, the goddess Kali, they all come from the dark continent and then eventually spread to other parts of the world. And there's been a lot of research that has been conducted in this field. So we can really say that the Dark Mother, to a certain extent, is the primordial mother. Because remember, when you look at creation mythology across the culture, darkness is always at the beginning. In Genesis it says, well, there was darkness and God's spirit hovered over the water. And we might add, the spirit of the Dark Mother hovered over the waters of the great void. And then the light comes in. So we have that separation, darkness, light. But the light is born from the darkness, from the primordial womb at the very beginning of time. So the Dark Mother is really the primordial mother that brings forth everything into manifestations and birth forth everything. So this is something I ask you to keep in mind as we dive more deeply into the Dark Mother and the essence, that she embodies, and her symbols that are so fascinating, especially at this time of great change that we are going through right now. And I will get back to that and deepen that a little bit more as we proceed. So I would like to start with Kali Ma, the Dark Mother in India. So we'll just have to resurrect her again. She's right now dormant, but there she is. And just in case something would go wrong with technology, which we all know happens, I also brought a hard copy of her, and I can pass that around perhaps. So Kali is very, very interesting because in the Shakta tradition, which focuses on the veneration of the Divine Mother, as she's called in India, the mother is actually seen as the creatress, the sustainer or preserver, and also the great devourer. So she stands for the cycle of creation, preservation, and dissolution. And so that's something that's a bit alien to a lot of us in Western culture, especially to imagine that, the Creator is not a father God like the archetypal father up in the heavens, but it is really the Divine Mother, that cosmic womb that births everything forth. So she's seen as that great matrix of creation, the womb, the great cosmic womb, and that's one of her functions. But very often she's venerated as the great devourer, as she's sometimes referred to in the scriptures in India, and that's when she appears sometimes as the terrifying mother. And here you can see Kali trampling on the body, the corpse of Lord Shiva. She's actually said to revive him, to breathe the force of life, the creative life force into him, so that, he can come back to life, because here he's depicted as a corpse, and she tramples on him, so she's dancing her frenzied dance on the cremation grounds. And now here is very interesting that Kali does have basically two functions as the great devourer, the mother of the great dissolution, as I like to refer to her. The first one is actually that Kali is often associated with physical death. That's why she's seen as dancing on the cremation grounds. Now, how many of you have traveled to India, to that sacred city that's called Benares at the banks of the Ganges, where Hindus go, a lot of pilgrims, and they prepare themselves for their death? So they go and meditate and pray and sometimes spend the last months of their lives there. Anybody traveled to this side? So you may remember the funeral pyres on the banks of the Ganges, and it's quite a sight. I mean, it feels like being on another planet for us Westerners, right? But it's so fascinating. And so this is really the city of Kali. And here's the thing, that we in the West have such a strange relationship to the phenomenon of death. I mean, just go to a cocktail party and start to talk about death and our mortality and see how popular you're still going to be after you. Just make that experiment. We're not doing a very good job in facing death, in dealing with our mortality. Now, indigenous cultures have a whole different approach that's much more wholesome and healthy. But this is the Dark Mother too. And so, again, we have to come to terms with the fear of death. And in India, the scriptures tell us if we worship the Dark Mother, with all our heart, she helps us to overcome the fear of death, the fear of our own mortality. And the thing is that, psychologists tell us that one of the greatest fears that we have is the fear of death. I mean, there are many other fears, but that is really something that is so important when we're on the spiritual path and we want to really proceed. We have to face this fear. We have to process it. We have to come to terms with it so that, we can heal ourselves from it and just, be comfortable with this great transition, because in the end, what is it? We're shedding our bodies. It's like, I think of it as cosmic recycling, but we just continue, just, in a different form. But, to me, it's just not a scary thing. But somehow I think our culture, and I grew up like that too, my parents would never talk about that. It was a big taboo in our family, the way I was raised. So that's one of Kali's function, helping us to overcome that most profound fear of death. Her other function is ego death. And as you can see, she's wearing this garland with severed heads around her. These are skulls, and she's holding, two heads, and blood is dripping from her tongue, her lolling tongue, and her eyes are bulging and protruding. And so, of course, for a lot of Westerners, this is a shocking view because they think like Hindus are venerating a demon. And when the British colonialized India in the 19th century, they freaked out when they so-called, they didn't know what to make of her gruesome manifestation. And even today, when you go into the internet, you can see people who say Hindus are worshipping a demon, and it's usually a picture of Kali, because they don't understand her deeper esoteric meaning. So all these heads that you see do represent our attachments. All that stuff we need to shed in order to evolve psychologically and spiritually. So greed, desire, all those illusions that we sometimes get entangled in, it's like that web. And so she helps us to disentangle ourselves. She shatters all these illusions and finite attachments. And you can see she's holding the club, the knife in one hand, so she's cutting right through the illusion, just like that. And it's a fierce act of love, of deep love and compassion, because it comes from love. So when I talk about ego, the ego is usually, people use the term, well, ego, he's a big ego, she's a big ego, whatever. I think it's important to make a discernment here. There's two parts of the ego. One is the ego that just helps us to survive, self-preservation. So that is, for example, what we need, in order to make a living. And I remember one of the yogic masters once said, you need to have exactly as much ego that you need to be able to safely cross the street without being hit by a car. I would say perhaps nowadays you need even more of that, especially in the Bay Area, to make a living. It just but that's the good part of the ego. That's the healthy part, and it goes back to the times when we evolved as Homo sapiens, and it just kept us safe, and again, it's the self-preservation part. Now, there's another part of the ego that is problematic, and that's the separate self. It's the ego that separates between you and me, between human and human, between nature and me. I'm separate from nature and all other than human beings, and also the split that goes through us, the body-mind split that has created such a deep wounding in our Western culture, because we tend to be a very dualistic culture, and the ego that also prevents us from truly tuning into our essence and realizing who we truly are, our true self, our true nature. And we all know, all of you, I would assume, have been on a spiritual path for quite some time, and perhaps you're having some spiritual practices, and that it's an arduous journey. It is not easy. And what Kali also does is, of course, that she helps, us to bring forth our shadow, our psychological shadow issues. The Dark Mother is related to all those parts of us that we like to oppress. We don't want to acknowledge those parts within us. Thank you, Heather. And it's hard to face those parts. And it's just like we have to hold that mirror in front of us, and we have to dare to really go deep and see where we have these wounded parts, these fragmented parts that we have not yet been able to integrate. And all the great mystics across all the religions tell us, they talk about the dark night journey of the soul. Master Eckhart, the great mystic in Christianity who lived during the Middle Ages, actually said that the ground of our soul is darkness, it's the dark. So only in darkness can healing be found. Only if we dare to go through the darkness, to face the darkness, can we heal ourselves and evolve psychologically and spiritually on our path. Otherwise, we're just stuck, and it's more comfortable, of course, to be in that place. But do we really want that? Does it really serve a deeper purpose if we choose the comfort zone, the easy place? So Kali is precisely here to actually push us out of our comfort zone, this bubble of security and safety that we sometimes like to create, our mind telling us, I just like it to be that way. And that's not how the Dark Mother works. She's actually the one who really pushes us to go beyond the boundaries of what we think, is the comfortable, because there's no growth in comfort. And yes, it's not easy, and yes, it is painful, but if you really want to evolve spiritually, you have to go into the unknown. So she's the mother of the great unknown, the unpredictable, and that is where the ego death eventually occurs. And again, when I talk about ego death, I refer to the separate self. That is what blocks us from truly realizing who we are. And as you can see, Kali is often naked, and what she symbolizes is the naked truth, the supreme truth, the truth of who we really are, if we're willing to surrender to her, and if we're willing to venture beyond the comfort zone into unknown territory. The unknown territory is the territory of the darkness. The darkness. The ground of the soul is dark. The night journey to go through challenging can be very harrowing, very arduous. We've all gone, I'm sure, through many challenges and very difficult situations. that is where the Dark Mother comes in and guides us if we invoke her guidance and allow her to work through us and allow us to work through these issues rather than bypassing them or worse yet, ignoring them. Because we all know bypassing and ignoring doesn't work. The issue will come up again. Sooner or later it will raise its face again, and then you cannot ignore it any longer. This is just, that's part of the human condition. This is our journey. So, perhaps I would like now at this point to do a little guided meditation on the darkness. And I was wondering how many of you have ever ventured deep into the womb of the earth, into one of those caves where you go down deep, 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 and you can't see the light anymore, and it's so dark. How many of you have gone to? So quite a few have had that experience. Okay, good. Now, I would invite you, for those of you who've been there, to perhaps recall that experience, and it's good perhaps closing your eyes or putting your hands in front of your eyes if you're so inclined. And for those of you who have not had that experience, I just invite you to visualize that you're entering into this dark cave deep in the womb of Mother Earth. So just imagine you're going deeper and deeper, and it's getting darker and darker. And it's so dark that you can't even see what's in front of you. In fact, the darkness is engulfing you. All the distractions dissolve. And you're all by yourself. And you don't know where the next step may take you. So recall that experience, what it felt like to be in that cave engulfed by infinite darkness, not knowing how you might even be able to find the way back out of the cave. What is coming up in you? Are there any fears? Fear of not being able to make it back to the exit, fear of getting lost in the cave, the fear of darkness, not being able to see anything. See if you can take yourself back to that place, or visualize it if you haven't had the experience. What is arising in you as you find yourself in utter darkness? Are you terrified by the dark? By your emotions that may come up? What is really happening? As you draw your attention deeper inwards, what is coming up for you? How are you going to find your way out of the cave? As you're reluctantly taking the next step because you don't know where the next step takes you, don't know if you may be falling into an abyss, a bottomless abyss. You have to trust, you have to surrender to this darkness. The way out is to surrender to the not knowing where the next step will lead you. The way out is to trust that you will be guided step by step. Trust that you're held in love and that there will be ground to stand upon. Trusting that you will eventually be guided to find your way out of the cave. But you're still in darkness. And there is no way you can avoid it. You have to face whatever comes up. And deep within yourself you know that you have to surrender to it and you have to trust that you will be guided step by step along your way. And I invite you to slowly open your eyes if you feel you're ready. What is happening when we are in utter darkness? What comes up? And you all have to find your own answer to that. But ultimately, wisdom and illumination can only be found in that darkness, which is the stillness that comes from that which created everything that has ever been born and ever will be born. It is the silence that comes from Spirit and that speaks to each one of us. And this is perhaps something that, you can do for yourself when you're at home. Go to a place where you are in that darkness and just sit with it in meditation and see what comes up for you. See what answers you may find to your questions. But it is only in darkness that we can find true wisdom and illumination. The path goes through that darkness, and this is what the Dark Mothers across the cultures ultimately stand for. This is what they embody. So, I'd like to move to another Dark Mother with whom, of course, many of us are familiar, at least those of us who grew up in the Roman Catholic tradition. This is one of the many Black Virgins or Black Mothers, as she's called, across Europe, which happens to be the continent of my origins. And this particular one is actually a famous Black Madonna that is in a monastery, a Baroque monastery called Einsiedeln in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, where I grew up and lived until 16 years ago, and I moved to the Bay Area thanks to that gentleman over there. What did you get me into? And there's, as you know, a lot of, all over Europe, there's Black Madonnas in Poland, there's Black Madonnas in southern Germany, in Bavaria, there's Black Madonnas, in Austria, in Switzerland, and a lot of them in France. I would say France has probably the highest amount. France is a country that has a lot of these feminine energies, and there's that whole history. And I wanted to mention that some of the Madonnas in France are actually sculpted like African goddesses. And some of them are actually holding a child that looks more like an adult. And I will get back to that, but it's very interesting. It shows clearly that a lot of the Black Madonnas also have these origins from the African continent, and a lot of those shrines dedicated to the Madonna were actually erected on older sanctuaries where pre-Christian goddesses were venerated, like Isis, for example. And that's no coincidence, of course, because when Christianity spread, well, they wanted to co-opt these ancient sanctuaries, and it was very helpful for proselytizing reasons. You can say, oh, well, that's just kind of a continuation. It's just a new goddess now in a Christian cover. And we know that also from the Guadalupe, in the Americas, the most famous Black Madonna in Mexico. And her church was actually erected on a shrine that was sacred to Tonantzin, the Aztec Earth Mother, the ancient Earth Mother, the Mayans and Aztec. So again, the dark Madonnas are very interesting because they have this symbolism that white Madonnas don't necessarily have. Of course, there is some blending and crossover. Well, as starters, the Black Madonnas are also related to the mysteries of the night and death, similar to Kali Ma in India, the Divine Mother. And it's interesting when you look at some of the functions of the Madonna. She serves as the intercessors for the souls of the dead, according to, official church doctrine. So she is related to the realm of the deceased. So that's one of her functions. And she's also related to sorrow, grief, and loss, which, is definitely part of the death process when we lose a beloved one. The Pietà in Rome, she's holding her son and grieving for her dead son. So these are some of her functions. And what's also very interesting is that dark Madonnas are symbolically related to the ancient Earth Mothers, these pre-Christian goddesses. And in the Middle Ages, the Madonna was especially venerated in rural areas on the land, especially the dark Madonna, because if you think about the earth, the deeper you dig in, the darker the layers of the earth become, and the more fertile the earth becomes. So the dark Madonnas are really like the ancient fertility goddesses, the pre-Christian goddesses who all had dark manifestations. And so the church did not like the veneration of the Black Madonna in the Middle Ages, and first they tried to oppress her worship, but that didn't work. And then they came up with all sorts of strange fairy tales to explain her dark skin colors by saying, well, her skin got blackened because of all the candles that are burning in the church, which of course is a total myth. As scholars have compellingly shown. So again, they didn't want the people to have the memory of these ancient fertility goddesses. Goddess forbid, that's pagan stuff, we don't want that. It's not compatible with church doctrine. So finally, when they realized they cannot oppress her worship, then they acknowledged it, and officially, it was allowed that people could flock to her shrines. And we know that the shrines of the Black Madonna are often located, in places where there is a water source, there is nature, like a cave, for example, a dark cave, or black stones, black rocks, just, water. So she's just out in raw nature because she is the Earth Mother. Just like Kali Ma, who also symbolizes the earth. She's the mother who governs the elemental forces of nature. And they are fierce sometimes. There's volcanic eruptions, there is storms, hurricanes, earthquakes. That's the dark mother speaking to us, sending us messages. Stop polluting our earth, stop dumping all these toxins into the water, into the air and into the earth. So that's when she roars, she has that fierce roaring, and it's messages that we better heed because, it's really getting pretty intense on our planet, and our Earth, as we all know, is suffering so terribly from all these unconscious actions. So again, the Madonna, the dark Madonna, is really related to the ancient Earth Mother. And of course, with that comes great healing powers. And if some of you ever travel to Europe and you go to the shrines of the Dark Mother, you will see all these gratitude, these expressions of gratitude of people throughout the centuries who had family members who got healed from diseases because they performed the pilgrimage and invoked the Dark Madonna and her healing powers. And there's so many miracles, healing miracles, that are associated with her powers, even more so than the light-skinned Madonnas. And of course, healing on the planet can only occur if there is also social healing. So it's not that surprising that a lot of these Black Madonnas have been invoked for social justice movements throughout time and history. So some examples are that the farm workers in Mexico have often invoked the Guadalupe, the Dark Madonna, for the social justice causes against oppression. And another example from Europe is that in Poland, in the 1980s, when Poland was still under the rule of the Soviet Union, together with the Czech Republic and other Eastern European states, the workers launched that movement, Solidarity, under the leadership of Lech Walesa. He was, a leading figure among the workers. And when they demonstrated, they would always carry the effigy of the Black Madonna of Poland and invoke her support for the freedom struggle against Soviet rule. And throughout history, and in Rome, you have this famous church, Maria Maggiore, where the Madonna del Popolo is venerated, and that means actually the Madonna of the people. If Popolo is the people, and that's all the people, no matter what gender, what social status, what skin color, everybody is welcomed and held by her infinite embrace. And today, this Madonna is white, but a woman scholar has researched that originally the famous Madonna del Popolo was actually a Black Mother. She was dark-skinned, and the church whitened her skin because, Rome, the papacy, is right there, and it just didn't quite fit the picture. But it's very interesting, to know this deeper symbolism and again, the social justice causes, because, again, healing goes both. It goes individually. We have to heal ourselves from, our shadow issues, but it's also collective healing that needs to occur. There needs to be more social justice because otherwise, we cannot evolve as humanity, as a whole. And so that's where the mother comes in. And so I want to go back to what I mentioned earlier about a lot of Black Madonnas in France, especially in the southern part of France, which is close to the African continent, are actually sculpted like African goddesses. They have these elongated faces, and the Jesus child that they carry in their arms is actually not a child, it's an adult figure. So these representations of the Black Madonna reveal that she's really the mother of all the people, not just of a privileged group of people, those who are ruling, but really she embraces all the people, no matter from which walks of life they are, and becomes truly the universal mother, holding them in that one infinite embrace and protection under her mantle. I want to perhaps show the next picture. It's a variation on the Madonna, the Black Madonna from Mexico, that we just spent a vacation there last December in Xcaret, which is about a 3-hour drive from Cancun. I think it was something around that. And we went into the church, and I just found this beautiful representation of the Guadalupe as a tree trunk with branches growing out of her body and roots going deep into the darkness, the womb of the earth. And it's her face, and she has the mantle with the stars, you know, it's like the turquoise with the golden stars, which, you know, a lot of Madonnas have. It's one of her symbols, the stars. And so it's a beautiful blending of pre-Christian Earth Mother, Tonantzin, you know, the Aztec Earth Mother, and the Madonna, the Christian Madonna, which her church was erected on top of, you know, the shrine sacred to Tonantzin, the Earth Mother. And I was just totally in awe and just felt called to meditate. I just got the head off at the bottom. My husband took the picture. I'm just looking up at her, and I was just completely in awe, and just so it was such a something so sublime. It was an energy that I just felt so powerful. It was that blending, and just so like, wow, you know, that's really great to see that. Even though it doesn't fit the framework of Orthodox Roman Catholic doctrine, of course, for obvious reasons. So I just wanted to share this particular image with you as well. So now to move slowly towards, you know, a little conclusion here. We all know that right now we are in a pretty intense time of change. Is there anybody here in the room who hasn't felt the intensity, especially over the last weeks and last month? Anybody here who hasn't felt that? So, I mean, it's you know, and we just feel like it's moving, you know, evolution is moving towards a climax, and we're wondering, well, when is the climax coming? When are we hitting rock bottom and things turn around? So this is, I believe, the time where the Dark Mother has really taken over probably the world, but it starts right here with the country we're all living in, because I don't know if you remember, in the fall of 2015, that was just before the election year in the United States, a documentary filmmaker who he created a movie on, you know, the environmental disaster, the environmental catastrophe now upon us, and he projected the face of Kali on the Empire State Building in New York, and it was huge. It covered the whole top of the building with neon light and different variations. You can Google that when you go back in the internet. Just Google Kali Empire State Building, and it will come up. I should actually have brought the picture, but I figured, you know, you can Google it. And it was in the fall of 2015, and that is so auspicious. To me, it meant like the Dark Mother really showed up, and she said, okay, I'm here now. I have arrived in the United States. I'm taking over America. I'm taking over the reins. And I mean, it was a pretty crazy election year. I mean, I think we can all agree on that, no matter for who we voted, but it was such a roller coaster, and everything was tossed upside down. Nothing was like back to normal, whatever normal means. I mean, it was just so. And it took everybody by surprise, the results too. I'm sure almost everybody here in this room was like, unbelievable. It took me several days to process, you know, the outcome. I'm not going to go into politics too much, but to say the very least, it came as a profound shock. And then I really went deep inside and started to reflect, well, why did this happen? There's a deeper evolutionary purpose at work. And that's when the Dark Mother comes in. So to me, that was one of these moments. And so I believe that in this time, you know, we're now going to like a birth canal. And everybody who's ever given biological birth knows that the birth pangs can be excruciatingly painful. And so I believe that globally we're now in this phase that we have to go to that. There's a lot of shadow issues coming to the surface. I mean, you see it politically being played out in this country with racism, talking about dark, you know, skin color. I mean, huge shadow issue that this country has never properly processed and healed, or, you know, of course, the whole genocide on Native Americans, which is a whole other subject. You know, sexism, it's all coming out. We have all these extremist groups in the country. I mean, this is a fact, you know, you can look at the map. And this is all stuff that has been repressed collectively, has not been dealt with. And now with these energies, these new energies and the Dark Mother at work, she brings it all to the surface that we have to hold that mirror in front of our face. We cannot ignore it anymore because it's right there in our face. And we don't like it necessarily. It's very uncomfortable. It's scary, you know. Sometimes, I mean, I have my moments where I'm like, I can't take this anymore. This is unbearable. I would assume that you can probably relate to that kind of experience. But it has to be dealt with, and it's you know, I feel like we're going through a collective dark night journey of the soul, and also individually on our own healing and releasing, shedding another layer, just like the snake, shedding another, whatever doesn't serve us any longer is being shedded and comes to the surface, so that we hopefully can go through it, process it, going through the eye of the storm, and eventually make room for the new to emerge, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. I really trust that, and it's not just naive. I really firmly believe that with every cell of my body that we'll get through this birth canal, and we just have to step it all up and, you know, do our dharmic purpose, whatever that might be for you guys. But I feel we're getting there. But I don't know what it will take. That's totally beyond, you know, can know. It's the great unknown. There we go again. It's the Dark Mother. Step into the darkness, into the unknown, in our lives and collectively on the planet as a whole. So this is how I see the Dark Mother being a symbol of our times of dramatic changes on all levels, and not just changes in culture with our political system where things are going to collapse and have to collapse to make room for the new, the economic system, and also nature, because nature is going through her trajectory too. I mean, we've had very intense weather patterns, you know, over the last 10 years. The hurricanes get more intense. That's the Dark Mother, the raw Earth Mother, speaking to us, sending us messages, as I mentioned earlier. So it's all part of the changes. And we have to just surrender to it. I mean, it's a hard one for us, and I'm still working on that big time. I get caught up, you know, my mind tells me, oh, it should figure it all out, isn't it under control? No, the Dark Mother shatters all our expectations and assumptions. Nothing is under control. So she is more in our right brain, you know, the right brain, which is more the intuition, the artistic expression, the creativity, the creative life force. Because our left brain, you know, it's kind of that whole logical, rational thing. Yes, it serves its purpose, but we all know we can come up with the most meticulous plans and expectations and assumptions, and everything will be completely different in the end. As it turns out, we all had these experiences. And that's where the Dark Mother comes in and shatters our best laid out plans. That's what she did with the election outcome last year. That's what she does on literally every level of society right now. And that's why we have to just surrender to her wisdom. Surrender that in that darkness, there is this great wisdom, this illumination to be gained eventually at the end of the tunnel. And again, you know, it's not going to be comfortable necessarily, but again, it's about coming to terms with our fears, with our discomfort, about going down that path. And if you truly want to evolve spiritually and psychologically, this is the journey that just we all have to take, you know. It's never a cakewalk. So to just conclude, yeah, I have a little personal story about the Dark Mother, if I just have a few more minutes, sure, that I'd like to share, where I had a real experience of her that moved me very deeply. As I've shared with some of you, I've gone to see Amachi, known as the Hugging Saint, who's very dark-skinned from southern India for the last 13 years or so, and have been very blessed in receiving so many hugs and healings from her. How many of you have met Amachi or received hug? Okay, well, that's the overwhelming majority. But the others may have heard about her. She travels to the West twice every year, and she has her ashram in Kerala in southern India, Amachi. Srimad Amritananda Mai Devi, which means Mother of Immortal Bliss, and she's known as the Hugging Saint. So you can just Google Hugging Saint. So anyway, a few years ago, it was about 6-7 years ago, I went to see Amma, and I gave her that picture of the Black Madonna of Einsiedeln that I showed you earlier. When I went up for my hug, and I wrote on the back, I just said, well, to me, Amma, you represent the essence of the Dark Madonna. I grew up Roman Catholic, being half Italian, so I just cannot draw a line of separation. And so I gave it to her, and she took it with a smile, and I got my hug. And then 2 days later, I returned to the ashram and had an acupuncture session with one of Amma's healers. And as I was lying on the mattress in a room with a few other people, with needles all over my body, and you can't move, you know how it is with acupuncture, you're like transfixed to the mattress, and you're lying there, and it's like, suddenly somebody knocks on the door and comes in, and it's a beautiful young African-American woman, and she asked for, the acupuncturist, Dr. Wang, and said, yeah, she's, I think, right now with other clients, and so she sat next to my mattress and just decided to wait. She said, I just want to thank her for her healing I received the day before. And suddenly she starts to intone like a humming sound. I mean, really, really deep humming, which is a very healing sound. And I was lying there with my needles, and she hums, and it just swells into a crescendo. And suddenly she starts to sing the Ave Maria in Latin, the original language. And she sings it with a voice that is sublime. I mean, it's a voice like I'm thinking it's not from this world. This woman has a voice. It's just like, and I'm lying there, and it reminds me of my childhood, going into these churches in Italy and always looking up at the Black Madonna. There was always something so sublime about her. I would just look up at her in awe and wonderment, as a little girl, and was so drawn to her energetically. And now I'm lying there, and this woman sings the Ave Maria, and it evoked all these memories from my childhood and, Europe, the culture where I grew up, that shaped me. And I had tears going down, and I just received such a profound healing. And I'm like, unbelievable. I'm giving that picture to Amma, telling her, well, the Black Madonna in the country where I grew up, I cannot separate between her essence and Amma's essence. And the following day, I'm having that experience. Where can you get that thing? And as it turned out, that African-American lady, Nicole was her name, was an aspiring star in the opera scene. That's what Dr. Wang told me in hindsight. She's really a rising star, and I had no idea who she was. So I got a professional opera singer chanting the Ave Maria, and I'm there, during literally almost my entire session. It was like unbelievable, it was just incredible. So that was a real experience, that deepened my connection, and really it was a journey into the heart of the Dark Mother. I mean, truly, and I will never forget this experience. It will, of course, never repeat itself just the way it was. It's always unique, and it's always different. So I would like to conclude just by reading just a very short passage. It's a verse from the Radiant Sutras in Hinduism, and it really relates to darkness and what we've been diving in more deeply tonight and discussing. And so it's just so beautiful. So I just would like to close with these verses, and it's just fairly short. So secrets are hidden in darkness and difficult nights. You awaken into a pang of aloneness, a howl of separation. This is the call of the Dark One, the roar of life seeking its source. The union you long for is within reach. Throw off all hesitation. Become one with the fear. Plunge into the uncanny, holy blackness. Eyes wide open. As if there were no other choice. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who has researched a lot of near-death experiences, I'm sure most of you have heard about her work, has actually said in a beautiful quote, and I'm not sure if I can find it, but otherwise I'm just trying to, mention it out of my head. It was just something along those lines, when you're in the darkness and you don't know where your next step is going to take you, and you have a fear of falling into that bottomless abyss, then there is two things that happen. You will be guided to find either solid ground to step on, or you will be taught to learn how to fly. That was more or less the meaning. Maybe not word by word, but this is, and it's just so beautiful. This is exactly the experience of being in the dark cave, going through the dark night journey of the soul. So it's about trusting that you will find your next step, you will find solid ground, or you will be taught to fly. But it only happens through the surrendering and trusting. So I would like to close with that. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
I'd just like to see if there's any questions or comments.
I would like to share something
Please.
that I've often wondered about my whole life. I think when I was young, I had some gifts that some people didn't understand, and that I didn't understand. Some of them I lost as I got older. Some of them I kept with me. But throughout my life, I've always had a profoundly beautiful Black woman who's come to me in my dreams. And she's the same woman, and she comes at times in my life when I'm not able to listen, or when I really need guidance or help. And it just really profoundly awakened something in me tonight. Thank you so much for everything you shared, because I've been aware of the energy of the dark goddesses, and to sit here and realize that I really feel like I've had one with me my whole life.
Yes.
It's really just profound to kind of just go a little bit today with that. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing it. That's quite a profound, beautiful experience. And she still comes to you now. I mean, it's pretty regular, it seems. She's really with you.
Times when there's something very celebratory or something very that I can't see or that I need help with that I'm not aware. I'll give you an example. I was in my late 20s, and she's come many times in my life. Not late 20s, I was 26, and I was told I needed a hysterectomy, and I didn't need one. But I didn't have health insurance at the time, and I was pretty sick. I had been bleeding for several weeks, and anyway, they couldn't give me a biopsy because of it. So, long story short, the night before this exploratory surgery, which may have resulted in a hysterectomy at 26, she came to me, and she took me into, in a dream, she took me into, I didn't know it was her guiding me, and I was taken into what I thought was a locker, and the door closed behind me, and I thought it was like a freezer, like in a restaurant, like some kind of freezing component space or whatever, and I looked up and I thought maybe they were hanging meats or, whatever, I wasn't sure what I was looking at, and then she turned and she showed me they were hanging uteruses. I know this is very vivid, sorry. And then I turned and she just looked at me and she's always had this amazing strength in her dreams where she's terrifying, but at the same time, I'm no longer afraid of it. And it's like this huge from, you know, the depths of the earth, this huge, no!
Wow.
And I woke up from that dream, and I didn't go in the next morning, and I ended up not ever having a hysterectomy. But I think I would have had one that day had I gone through with that surgery. So that was like one of the more powerful moments.
Yes.
But she's been with me my whole life, and I've never really talked about it till just now. But thank you so much. You know?
Well, and thank you for coming. It's so wonderful to have you with us. And what a powerful message that you received. And yes, hysterectomies can be very intrusive to the body of a woman. I mean, I've known people who had it, and it was actually created a lot of health problems, you know, follow-up health problems. So that was a great blessing that she really communicated so clearly to
you.
you.
I just feel a lot of grief and sadness, I want to say, because I feel like I've been disconnected from her in so many ways. I too grew up Catholic with the white Madonna, and I hope there's a way in our culture to bring more of this to the forefront and to people's awareness.
Especially now.
Yes, especially now, exactly.
So I'd like to share something on that note of bringing more of this sort of insights into society. So I'm part of a dance troupe, and we do a shamanic fusion dance. And so one of the exercises or one of the ceremonies that we do is a Kali Ma ceremony. And it's designed to really make people the dancers feel uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable, to break us out of this illusion of presence that we have, of permanence that we have. So what we do is we actually pair off into groups, and we insult each other. And it's really difficult for the person doing the insulting to try to find those things, because this is a person we dance with, this is my friend, my dance partner, you know, somebody that I'm close to, and to find that power, that Kali within us, to actually make somebody feel extremely uncomfortable is many times as difficult as the person receiving that. And so, you know, so many times people are in tears, and it's just so amazingly difficult, you know. Some people are a little better than others at you know, making people feel uncomfortable and working through all of that uncomfort. But it's really very powerful, as you said, to work through things that are uncomfortable, because that's where we get our deepest healing from.
Yes.
Beautiful. That just made me think of one more thing. When you were taking us in that dark space,
I
realized, yes, of course we have our fears, you know, whatever they may be, aloneness or whatever it might be about, but it's so empowering to go to that place, to realize you can either end up standing or flying. Absolutely.
Well, glad. And again, as you said, and also you with your dance group, it's not something that our culture encourages us to do. It's actually quite the opposite. It's more avoidance, you know. I don't want to go to that place because it doesn't feel comfortable. And so I think that what's going on right now, you know, again, this very critical evolutionary moment that we're going through will actually force us to go to these places that are not necessarily just comfortable. I like it or not, everybody feels it on a certain level. You can't completely avoid and ignore it any longer. This is what I believe. And, you know, even what's going on in the world at large, you know, we're all in this together, right? But this is also beautiful work with the dance group. So you're doing it here in Maui, or you're traveling internationally?
I'm from the Bay Area.
You're in the Bay Area,
So we have, in fact, I'm leaving here to Mexico in a week to go to a retreat where we're having everyone get together. And we'll do this ceremony. And there will be people that will struggle with it, and there are people that will, you know, become enlivened by it, and I'll actually carry this lecture with me when I'm a part of that. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for coming. It's been a real privilege and honor to be here with all of you. I just really it's a real treat. And if you have more questions, I mean, I want to also be mindful of our time, because we have this beautiful treat, you know, these sound healings, and I know that Don and Heather are just doing such an incredible job. We've been blessed with several of their sound healing and, you know, rituals, and so I want to honor that. Just one quick little practical thing. The book, for those of you who are interested in getting that, I brought a few samples, so you can purchase it for $15 per book. It's a little discount tonight. And it does have still the old cover, and it's now coming out with a publisher this fall with exactly the same content, but the new cover that Heather showed, on Facebook and, wherever you were announcing, our gathering tonight. So just to avoid any confusion there, it's still the same content. So you can get it for, a discounted price tonight. Let me know if you'd like it, or if you want to be on the list, on the email list, there's a sign-up sheet there, and I would never share your contact information with anybody else. It's very confidential. So, yeah, and if you have more questions, you can always approach me later on. But I definitely can't wait now to get to the next part of the evening, which is a real treat as well.